Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets hosted the Houston Rockets at the Barclays Center, and just like we all knew, it was an early, dominant game that was never in doubt. We break down the Cam Thomas start and the late game angst, all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day and sometimes bonus on the weekends. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the week and weekend, free on all those great platforms. And Doug, 104-106, the Nets win over the Houston Rockets, a game, a fourth quarter that is all too familiar for Nets fans. Thankfully, this one came out on the winning side, as again, nobody had any doubts the Nets were going to pull this one out.
I mean, never in doubt. Just super solid. Sit there, relax, relax in the center, put your feet up, watch an easy Nets win. They're up a lot. No big deal. I mean,
didn't feel like, why did I do this to myself on a Saturday night? It's the weekend. Why would I subject myself to this type of misery?
I did joke going into the fourth quarter. We joked. I said, what's the number of points that Nets would need to be up that you would feel comfortable waiting until the final buzzer? I said 1 million. Yeah. Like anything short of 1 million, I'm not sure you can relax with this team. The fourth quarters have been, they've just been, I don't even want to call them a wild ride. They've just been really been something else. The Nets have been the worst fourth quarter team in basketball in January. It's not even close to like minus 5.5 in fourth quarters over the last month. The next closest team is like minus 3.3 or something like that. It's just been it's been such a bad run in these fourth quarters. I guess kudos to them. They actually won this game. The other ones they've blown: Clippers, Lakers, Heat, all these other games that they, Knicks, all these other games that they've been leading and then gone into the fourth quarter and just totally given it away. They tried their absolute hardest to give this one away in the end in new and frankly creative ways to try to give away a game near the end. And luckily, the Rockets just kind of bailed them out in the end. I don't even know if it was them that won. It was just another fourth quarter. Thankfully, it's a W, but it's an increasing problem for this team.
And obviously, we're going to dial in on that even deeper here. But before we do, let's take the silver lining, the bright moments when we can, right? Cam Thomas starts in this game for the Brooklyn Nets. Cam Johnson was out for personal reasons tonight. So, as we said before, sometimes Jacque Vaughn only makes adjustments when it feels like there's no other choice in what they're going to do. Cam Thomas starts, and across this game, it was exactly, I think, what we all anticipated, right? 11 for 19 from the field, 3 of 6 from beyond the arc, 12 of 15 at the line. 37-point performance. Only one other net in Dorian Finney-Smith had a better plus-minus rating. This is, if you are a Cam Thomas fan, if you believe that he's one of the top 2 or 3 best players on this roster, this is exactly what you thought would happen if you inserted him to the starting lineup and he played big minutes.
Yeah, great for him. 37 points in 41 minutes. Like you said, a plus 12. He at halftime had a great quote where they were interviewing him going into halftime, and they were basically, why are you up 20? I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like, why are you up 20 points? He's like, oh, because when I play my version of basketball, like, we're gonna win. Right? It was very much. I don't know if I would call it a pointed comment, but it was definitely oh, this is what can happen for this team if I'm allowed to play a lot of minutes. I don't think there was a lot of subtext to it. I think he was basically just saying it. And they did start this starting lineup, which I couldn't believe this when I looked it up before the game, that this lineup had played only like 24 minutes together all season.
When you get away from it. Yeah.
And which is crazy because it's like, okay, because it was basically all Cam Johnson and those lineups got completely trucked. Now this 4-man lineup also had been not very good going into this game, but the Dorian Finney-Smith to Cam Johnson swap had not been something they'd employed. I was floored by how few minutes over the course of the whole season that they played these guys together. It's going to offer up another very interesting subplot here for when Cam Johnson does return about like who's going to start, right? Maybe it's just maybe DFS getting hurt is going to bail them out again on like a hard decision. That's a terrible way for it to like be viewed. And maybe they just end up having to go back to that starting lineup with no Dorian Finney-Smith. And that's sort of been another theme of this season, is saved from some of the tough choices over the course of the year. and we'll talk about Ben Simmons getting back into the mix too. But overall, you can't put Cam Johnson back on the bench. Like after this game, they shouldn't have before, by the way.
Cam Thomas.
Oh, sorry, Cam Thomas. Yeah. They shouldn't have done it before. And now you just can't. He can't go back to the bench. Like, I'm sorry. 37 points. He's the only reason they won. Like, right? Am I wrong here? It'd be bonkers for him to go back to the bench here.
No, the whatever the mentality has been about. I mean, we can paint the entire picture, right? The contracts that were given out, the trade pieces that came back from all the superstars. We understand all the narratives around why you have not chosen to do something. But at a certain point, and we've already been there for quite some time, it just the eye test tells you, right? The eye test tells you and by the way, for all the deficiencies that offensively they have, not enough on-ball guys that can create an ISO, that can take guys off the dribble, that can drive at the basket. Cam Thomas answers a lot of those questions, and I'll pay him even a deeper compliment here around his game, which we've talked about. I think you have also seen the growth for his game. Now, this one was about his offensive skill set and getting the job done, right? So pointing 3 assists isn't necessarily something that's going to jump off the page at you, nor should it. But we talk about, if you want to say removing roadblocks, Jacques Vaughn says it's about both ends of the floor. Well, Cam Thomas, he's not a perfect defender, but guess what he is? Fully engaged, playing with high energy. He seems to have a better positional sense about where he's supposed to be. So while what he does offensively should be more than enough to put him into the starting lineup and never look back, it's also, if you wanted to point to that end of the floor, he's at least doing the things you want. He fundamentally understands where he needs to be on that end. You don't look at that as being, hey, there's this trade-off here. Is it perfect? By no stretch of the imagination am I suggesting that. But I can't look at it now and say, well, offensively, he's an absolute firecracker. Jacques Vaughn maybe is his thinking. But defensively, what do we lose when he's on the floor? Well, I'm sorry. Even if you have 37 points in 41 minutes and you're a plus 12, even if you were an absolute goose egg on the defensive end, it would show up in some of those ancillary analytics that you maybe want to point to here. I just think it's time you have to make a decision like this, especially when you think about what Cam Johnson, from an offensive skill set, does not have for you when he's been in the starting rotation.
Yeah, I think I don't think I'll go all the way there on the defensive stuff, but it doesn't really matter, honestly.
Effort and energy is there, though. Like, would you agree on, like, effort and energy has been there enough for Cam Thomas when you say, the same way we talk about any great offensive player, at least if he's engaged and making the effort, then I don't think you can dog him for it. He did have one glaring error here in this game defensively, but overall, he
is closing it. Yes, he's closing out. He's not losing his guys too much. He gets picked on a lot, but like that's just probably just going to end up happening. It doesn't actually matter. In the end, they don't have any other guys that can really dial up the scoring to this level. Right. And I know, like, sometimes like evaluating the situation after your best game is not always the best way. It's just like you should never ever evaluate things after the worst game. But it's just been so clear that they've been so many times have struggled to score, so many times have needed baskets, so many times have allowed, like just like tonight, honestly, have allowed other teams to get back in games over long stretches because they can't, because the offense completely bogs down. This is what happens in the fourth quarter often with them, is that the offense just goes into the absolute mud and quicksand and they can't do anything. And he is a bailout guy in terms of that. And they just need to have it. So I really think, and Jacques Vaughn, real quick, is we usually don't catch the post gamers because when we podcast after the post game, Jacques Vaughn was asked tonight by Eric Slater over at Clutch Points, friend of the podcast, whether tonight's performance would earn him a place in the starting lineup. He wasn't definitive about it. He said, Vaughn says it's always the thoughts about who's been there. It's about trying to balance the group out. I know Cam can score with the first group. I love his aggressiveness. We needed it. And it's basically just saying it's on his mind. So he stopped short of saying it.
Right. And I don't think you expect him to come out in the post game and go, yep, he's our starter going forward now. But it should.
But I'll tell you right now, and we can get into some of this other stuff. But if he's not, like, I just don't know what we're doing here. You know what I mean? It's already probably past the point of no return with this stuff. But you just have to do it. Like, you have to move someone else out. Like someone else can't get minutes over him. It's like, it's too crazy.
Coming up here in a second, we'll talk about the backcourt tandem of Spencer Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas and how it actually worked in different ways tonight. Also, how they attacked Houston differently than their previous meeting. The absolutely standout performance or aggressive nature from one Nicholas Claxton. We get into all the other details of how the Nets pulled out this win coming up in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll find it exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need. At the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available for U.S. customers. And when you're done with that, go visit our friends over on FanDuel. No better time to get in on the action over on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. FanDuel, right now, $5 bet. All you got to do, win or lose, you're going to grab $150 in bonus bets. It's just that easy. And that $5 bet, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't matter win or lose, and you can do anything over there. You can do the live same game parlays, you can do the over-unders, you can do the player props, which I absolutely love to get into every single night over in the props. It's all available to you over on FanDuel. All you do right now, you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon.
All right, so as we continue the post-game podcast for the Brooklyn Nets, who got the win 106-104, and it really did come down to surviving the fourth quarter. Before we do get to that, though, I did want to mention that one of the things that was the talking points around the issues for the Nets, and maybe in Jacques Vaughn's mind, starting Cam Thomas would be the other issue. Well, why is Spencer Dinwiddie still starting too, maybe? But tonight, again, I thought was a good example, and maybe this has developed over time for them on the practice court and not necessarily always in game. But I thought that there was a better balance, though Spencer Dinwiddie didn't score in the first half, where possession to possession, they created a variable for the Houston defense. It's, well, Cam Thomas may be the ball handler or Spencer Dinwiddie may be. Cam Thomas was driving at the basket and kicking out early in addition to doing all of his scoring. Spencer Dinwiddie was facilitating, finished with 9 assists in this game. If both of them, and again, as Cam Thomas's game continues to expand and grow, there starts to become a respect that you have to pay on both ends. I think it opens up the floor a little more, creates a little more spacing, and makes for a balanced offensive attack, even if it's primarily going to end up with Cam Thomas shooting, Cam Thomas dunking down big buckets. Ran into some problems again with the blitzing double teams to start the second half in this game, but I was pleasantly surprised how those two and the team overall were able to operate, because previous samples suggested these guys could not coexist if their lives depended on it together.
Yeah, I mean, early on in this game, it was pretty obvious that they had marching orders to attack the Houston drop, right? Like you can see it going early, and that's good for the Nets. Like, because if the Nets guys, like specifically Cam and well, I'll get to Dinwiddie in 1 second, but if Cam and Mikal can beat the primary defenders on the screen and switches, and the defender can't make their way over the screen, then those guys are pretty good in the mid range, right? So that's pretty designed that if they can set things up pretty early, a drop defense with Şengün was going to be something they could attack, and they did, like, relentlessly attacked. And that's really actually the big reason they were able to jump out to a big lead. Where Dinwiddie comes in and where we saw him get more aggressive here tonight is when they're still trying to attack that matchup, and a guy like Şengün comes on the level of the screen, then Dinwiddie has like a blow-by power. And we mentioned this last podcast too, that we just seen so much less of him getting to the rim, him getting to the foul line, like just sort of that aggressiveness. We saw it more tonight, and we saw actually that was pretty well schemed for the Nets. Like that was like pretty much as like what we're gonna do is that if they come to the level, go get to the rim. If they're gonna drop back, get into the mid range. They were running these actions to Cam Thomas, these like DHO kind of pistol actions between Dinwiddie and Cam early on, before they started blitzing, and then later they really started trapping it hard. But overall, I thought that was like a kind of a good formula against an all switching defense. They're going to run into major problems, right? Like we've seen them, like they really can't generate enough space. And we've seen it really bog down. And actually, frankly, I know I'm going long here, but like that's actually why this fourth quarter was such a problem. Like during that comeback, Şengün was off the court. Like they went really small. The Rockets went really small, had Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, guys like this. They were switching everything, and it became really, really hard for the Nets. Like they got destroyed. And so if you want to see like in game how something can go from kind of good to kind of bad, like we saw that. Long story short, in situations like this, I think that they can continue to kind of exploit those kinds of matchups when they're provided. It's not going to be every game, but I think that's why you saw a little more synergy between these guys early on.
And all 5 starters for the Brooklyn Nets in double digits. Mikal Bridges kicked in 6 of 14 for 19 points for himself as well. Got to the line 6 times in this game, too. We mentioned the fourth quarter. We mentioned the struggles. Once again, this is a game where in the fourth, 34-18, Brooklyn is outscored by the Houston Rockets. You had highlighted there in the first segment the past struggles in the fourth. Against the Heat back on the 15th, lost 96-95, outscored 8-2 to end the game, had a 16-point lead in the third. Against the Blazers, outscored 8-2 to end the game, 11-point lead in the third quarter. Lost 125-114 to the Clippers, 18-point lead, 22-0 run in the fourth quarter. It was a 10-3 run against the Knicks after having a 10-point lead in the third quarter in that loss as well. So this ongoing theme for them of just not being able to carry over the success that they had. And you kind of highlighted there too. The Nets don't have, when there's the matchups to attack, that's great. And we often say, well, what about when the other team adjusts? They don't have the next adjustment to go to. And tonight, things, some shots don't fall. Well, they lose Dorian Finney-Smith as well. But it's another example of just, it doesn't seem like they have the second and third plan of attack or mode of operation when you need to close games out late.
And they also, like, when hack-a-clacks late, that kind of worked. Like, they were just doing so.
That opened up a real issue, by the way, not having Dorian Finney-Smith as well and not having Day'Ron Sharpe now. Once Claxton had to come off the floor, they went with Royce O'Neal at the 5. Anyone, we saw it over on Twitter, Harry Giles time. I was like, don't even think about it. It's not going to happen. It's going to be Royce O'Neal. They're going to go small.
Right. So, like, they were kind of in desperation mode too, right? You're going hack and Claxton. It's kind of working. He's missing some of his free throws. Exactly. Like, they don't have another guy. They have to take him off the court. Now you're really just way too small. The DFS injury hurt. Hopefully he's going to be okay. So there were a couple other, like, little things that went against them here. It's really kind of their own design. Like, this is the team they have. So it can't really be an excuse, but there were some things that we saw that you don't typically see on a night-to-night basis, but it doesn't matter. Like, it all kind of adds up to the same thing, and why this team ends up sort of having issues in those spans. It is just troubling. And I actually wonder too, with the fourth quarter piece, like, the Nets know, because they've commented and been asked about it. The Nets know they've been bad in the fourth quarter. And I actually wonder if there's just a little mental piece here to it also. It's like, oh, here we go again. Like, it's a very much a here we go again variety. If you think the fans are in on this, which obviously we all are, the players are totally aware of this too. And so is the other team. And so these other teams just kind of get headstrong about where they should go. And that's kind of working also. So I think it's like this, just a dovetailing of all these different things together that's just not helping them. And it just really, part of this is just a mental thing. They have to be able to get over it. I'm hoping that tonight helps that. They're like, okay, finally, it didn't look pretty, but we did get the W. Tried really hard not to. The inbound with the Amen Thompson 3, the guy looks like the second, fifth 3-pointers made his whole career this year. He drains one. It's like all these little things. So for Şengün to miss the free throw, thank goodness.
And there's a lot of little moments in this game too that you mentioned about. Not only these are all moments, but Cam Thomas steps out of bounds going on the baseline, no call there. I feel like that's now superstar moment for him. But even more importantly, when they got the ball forward and Cam Thomas had it in the corner and he's just holding on to it, waiting to get fouled. Listen, you want to go back and look at that. There's a real world where that was a tie-up and it should have been a jump ball because he left it exposed there.
They got bailed out there too. That should have been a jump ball. That was a bad call. Like that was an instinct whistle because they think he's
you
fouling.
Anticipate the foul, so I'm ready to blow the whistle as soon as you get near him, right? Yeah,
great call. I meant to mention that. Good job remembering that, because that was the other one. It was like, oh, they just got totally bailed out. They got bailed out in a Jayshawn Tate step back 3 with time left in the shot clock. I was like, oh my God, you'll take that. Do that every time, please. My goodness. So they actually really did. It's crazy to say they got helped here, but sometimes those little things do need to kind of go your way to get over the hump. They've had little things go wrong for them in past games that haven't gone for them. So the idea here is that this stuff kind of evens out over the long term.
Of course. So coming up here in a second, obviously the other news, we don't typically do this in our post games, but when you get updates and the rumor that Ben Simmons could be returning to the court as early as Monday night, we want to make sure we talk about that, highlight Dorian Finney-Smith again here, and what the short-term impact is for the Brooklyn Nets as we know that trade deadline looms. We'll get into that coming up here in just 1 second.
All right. Let you know that this episode of Locked On Nets is brought to you by Quiz. Today, we're going to have some fun. Test your knowledge of the Nets right now. Just a little taste of what you're going to get over on Quiz. Which player holds the record for most points scored in a single game for the Nets? Vince Carter, Brooke Lopez, Jason Kidd, Kyrie Irving? Yeah, the answer is Kyrie Irving. I hope you said that over there, friends. Quiz is it's Quiz got with 3 eyes, which is really important to know when you're typing it in. Quiz with 3 eyes. Next generation trivia experience is the world's first platform where you can earn money playing knowledge games. And for Locked On Nets fans, they created an NBA quiz game where you can test your knowledge and win real cash. Play with friends or other fans and let your knowledge shine all the way to the bank, baby. You can play without downloading anything. You just go to app.quiz, QUIIIZ.com. Start playing today. NBA Quiz is the ultimate knowledge challenge for fans that live and breathe basketball. Go to app.quiz.com, test your knowledge, and win cash today. That's Quiz with 3 eyes, just like the three-pointer. Play now. Showcase your skills and take home cash prizes. App.quiz.com, where fans become champions.
All right, so as we continue the post-game wrap-up show here and turn our attention a little bit to the injury report, reminder, go over to WeGotNets.com where you can sign up and receive a free ebook history about all those big moments for the Brooklyn Nets. Will the 106-104 victory over the Houston Rockets midway through a season end up making it? Probably not. There's a lot of good things in there about Jason Kidd and all those key moments. Totally free over at WeGotNets.com. Sign up for that today and be alerted when we have some other great content coming your way as well. Now, when we think about the next step for the Brooklyn Nets, and this is where I will say, let's start with the news. Ben Simmons, about a week ago, we talked about it. Jacques Vaughn was asked. It was a lot of, well, if maybe, then possibly, so too, could be, when maybe, I don't know. Fast forward a few days, he's playing down in the G League, getting some live bodies around him, and now reports are he could return as soon as, not 100%, but could return as soon as Monday night against Utah for the Brooklyn Nets. Point stop. How surprised are you that this is how quickly the talk to me in 2 weeks went to he'll now be making his return potentially this week?
I'm not like shocked by it, only because while the updates weren't specific, they weren't of the same. Like there were a couple more specific things, like he was going to go practice in Long Island, right? Like we did know that like a couple things were happening here. So it's the only, I still wasn't holding out a ton of hope, only because I think that's just where we have to be with Simmons overall, just because of just like how little he's played over the last couple of years. But I did think that those, while vague, offered a few different tidbits that we really hadn't seen before. So I'm not totally shocked by it. I'm glad that he's getting back into this stretch. My expectations are low, but that's fine. Like I want him to be good. I'm just saying the expectations are low because I think that's where we need to live with him.
Another player who had a really good game tonight and took the previous matchup was Nicholas Claxton very seriously. By the way, some of the final foul shots, Nicholas Claxton said, Sengun, I'm going to go ahead and throw your body to the ground here because I want this rebound. That led to another very tight situation. How do you think, though, that this informs if anything, what the Nets are going to do ahead of the deadline? Because the funny thing here is, for the most part, we've said, hey, the best thing you can root for is a healthy Ben Simmons. It helps a lot with some of the deficiencies that this team has. But backtrack yourself to the beginning of the year. One of the biggest problems was Nicholas Claxton and Ben Simmons can't play together. So it's funny how it's still the same theme of a lot of talented players, but one of the biggest issues is not all these pieces fit together the right way. Maybe a happy problem to have, but I think people are maybe losing the forest for the trees a little bit on Ben Simmons' return starts to play, and it's only going to be positive in terms of the impact it has.
I just like don't know how you think that. I mean, it wasn't like all amazing before he got hurt, right? And so I've been actually a little surprised to see some of those reactions, and I think that's mostly like just maybe like a little forgetting. He was fine, right? Like the numbers were there. He still wasn't doing the things the Nets need him to do the most, which is try to get to the basket with relative consistency. But I will say this. They do need his particular like versatility more than ever right now. And I think that's like the most important thing. So even if you back out the part where the deficiencies of the game are, the part where he can guard 1 through 5, pretty much, the part where he can get out into transition, they've desperately lacked guys. They stink in transition. They gotta, I'll look at the stats here while we're kind of talking, but they gotta be one of the worst transition teams in basketball. They're horrible at it when they do it, and they barely do it. So he'll definitely help there. Having sort of just like a secondary rebounder is a really pretty important part for their scheme. They can go back to switching a lot more, right? When just sort of more consistently, I will. So I think all those parts, it will help. I I just want to pump the brakes on like elation around this or like season saving stuff. I don't think we're there, and I don't think he has a track record. Last point on that too. I think that, like we said at the beginning, I think they're saved uncomfortable conversations early because they'll just easily bring him off the bench and like not try to start and he'll just come in for Claxton, so you don't even have to worry about it. Right. Like, I think they'll have a really they'll ease him into the minutes because they'll probably be like 16 to 18 minutes or something like that for like the foreseeable future. So I think that they're going to be saved any uncomfortable fit issues by just like literally just bringing him in for Claxton because Sharp isn't playing. It's like funny how these things have worked. It's to some degree for this team over the course of the year, but I think that's a pretty, right? Like, is that obvious? It feels like it's almost too obvious that that's what's going to happen.
Oh, of course. Right. Yeah. Start to roll you into this thing, see how it looks, find out maybe, and by the way, maybe you want to lump this in with if it's time to start Cam Thomas and it's maybe time for Cam Johnson to go to the bench. Well, all of a sudden you can start experimenting with different combinations that maybe open up opportunities to see how you can be successful while making these moves. Dorian Finney-Smith being hurt here changes it a little bit in terms of the different combinations you want to go with, depending on what the update is we get with him. He was available, Dorian Finney-Smith, to return tonight, never did. So yeah,
they said that, then they changed it. So I'm not exactly sure. So I don't know if the initial report was wrong. They said he was available to return on the broadcast, but then Nets PR like instantly came out and let us know that he was not returning. So I actually wonder if there was a wires cross piece about him being available to return.
And so at a minimum here too, Brian Lewis from the New York Post reported I'm assuming after the game today or at some point, left ankle day to day is the current status for Dorian Finney-Smith. So
thank goodness though, because that looked worse. And I hate to make this like a commodity piece, but it's just a logistical thing. Him getting hurt 8 days before the trade deadline or 10 days before the trade deadline or whatever would have been like, oh my goodness, because that is a guy that could get traded for actual real pieces. And again, I really don't like doing this because it feels gross, but it is just a thing. Like he's been talked about as being a trade piece here for a long time. It would be an important piece for a good team that's really good. And we just seen what happens with this team sometimes when their guys get hurt around the trade deadline. Seth Curry, Joe Harris, but these guys were hurt at the deadline. They might have been able to fetch something. They just weren't playing. And it's really hard to trade hurt guys at the deadline. And so I was like, oh, I hate it. And again, I'm just caveating this for the fourth time that I hate thinking like that, but it's part of the game.
And one other, so I mean, tying into that too is I do wonder. I wonder how a final bow on Ben Simmons and for the Nets going towards the deadline. You mentioned injuries and otherwise. I wonder for how long the Nets have felt confident about where Ben Simmons was in terms of his process to getting back on the court. Not confident about if he'll be 100% healthy going forward in perpetuity, but just okay. We believe that right around a little bit ahead of the trade deadline, we're going to get Ben Simmons back. I'm interested to see how that informs it. You only have 5 games. He's going to have to go through a ramp up. So there are some key matchups here. Defensively, this has been a team that over the month of January was top 10. So they had turned that end of the court around. Ben should help with that as well. But now you get all the areas that they've benefited from, benefited from injuries in terms of not having to make tough decisions. Now it's like, I wonder if this just muddles their process going to the deadline here too, because you don't have this clear path going forward with anybody, Ben Simmons included. So again, Nets get the win tonight. That's great. They're trying to just get back to winning ways. You can look back at these recent games and say they could have won. They could have won all those games, but they didn't. And the one difference here for me going forward is Ben Simmons' return does not change the fourth quarter concerns for this team. It actually heightens them because he's another guy that can't go to the free throw line like Nicholas Claxton. So a blessing in some areas, a detriment in others. It still feels like the same theme of the season carries through. Pieces fitting together, tough decisions to make. Luckily, the Nets at least got this win tonight against Houston.
And real quick, I looked at their transition numbers, and for some reason, NBA.com doesn't allow you. I should look somewhere else. Doesn't allow you to parse it by day because I was trying, but it's not going to matter too much because Simmons has missed most of the season. They are well below average in terms of frequency of transition, just possessions, and then they are like 5th to last in effective field goal percentage on 4th to last, an effective field goal percentage in transition as well. So just like an overall pretty bad transition team. They actually had more attempts than I had seen overall, but But anyway, the two numbers, like the frequency and the effective field goal percentage for transition, was bad. So anyway,
and that should help perimeter shooters. That should
by the
help
way,
point and spacing and all that stuff, right? Like it's all in
I'm a
theory.
big stats and eye test together kind of guy. Like I was not positive, by the way, before I looked at those transition things that where they were exactly. I felt like that's probably where they were. But then I'm really hesitant sometimes to make claims like that because I know everyone hates it, but eye test is great and stats watch every game, every minute. So it's why it's better. It's good to go look at that stuff as well. We're going to stick around here for a few minutes in YouTube Live because I see we got a bunch of people in here following a Nets win. Easy to sometimes forget because the fourth quarter was so bad. It's still a W, baby. We still got the win here for the Nets. And that's the important thing. Go check out WeGotNets.com. Adam and I wrote a book that comes at you for 5 different days, right? So it's a book that comes at you 1 chapter a day for 5 days, different stories about the Nets over the last couple decades, some recent ones, some older ones. We had a ton of fun writing this one. Really pumped to have you read it as well. The feedback we've gotten on it's great so far. So really appreciate everyone that's gotten back because they've given out a lot of these already. Go get them for yourself. WeGotNets.com.
And of course, I know in my heart that man is good, that what is right will always eventually triumph. And there's purpose and worth to each and every step. Why, that's Ronnie Reagan.
He was a guy. Well, he was a person that said that. We'll be back again. We'll be back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Maybe not one of the greatest poets of all time. Basketball. Yeah. Ah, yes, my friends. A little bonus content for you over on YouTube. Not going to run as long as we normally do. It's the weekend. You can tell old Doug Norrie's getting a little sleepy. He's already rubbing.
No, I'm not actually.
I'm
not sleepy. Tonight's different because tonight I'm not sleepy. I know I started to rub my eye, but it's not that. I gotta pick my daughter up. Your kids get older. They start staying out later, which is an absolute disaster for a guy like me who wants to just go to bed early.
Crazy part about doing the bonus episodes, like I didn't anticipate this. When I go out of my way to just like throw out a soft excuse, you never think the father's just going to totally throw his daughter under the bus. But, that's the way it goes sometimes. That's the nature of it. At Locked On Nets, if you got a comment or something you want to get into here, obviously, you mentioned at the end of the episode, by the way, that we didn't maybe spend as much time as we normally do after wins, kind of celebrating the positives and the good things.
Yeah.
The Nets went a long way to making that hard to do because they did it again in the fourth quarter, right? Like it really does suck a lot of the life out of was a good win against a good team.
Right. I don't even blame us for this because it's like when you get outscored 34-18 and you're up 28 points or whatever they were in this game or whatever what was the most they were up? Was it 28? I mean, they were up.
It was 28 early. Yeah. First half 28. Yeah.
Right. So they're up at 28 points and to basically having a nail biter to the point where like it probably should have gone to overtime. Like to go all the way from there from A to B is tough. So it does take the life out of you a little bit, and it is tough. Now, I think for me, I don't know about you. I think some Nets fans probably wear this a little harder than we do. I don't. It doesn't like make me sick to my stomach or whatever if they lose. I do want them to win every game. It's great, mostly because it's like way more fun to talk about. I think that's kind of where I land, but it is one of those situations, right? I think we came into this, the tenor felt more like a loss, but that's just kind of where we are with the season. It's been a rough season.
I will say on that note, before we get into some comments here, that I had this thought the other day because over the past month or so, and this is what happens when, a team loses 14 out of 18 games, right? Like you can't help but start to feel into the frustrations and be disappointed about things and start to look at a team in a different way than maybe ultimately you should. And what I mean by that is the Nets could lose 30 games in a row. Internally for them, it doesn't really change what their timeline and perspective was. We got these guys in a trade. They're going to be our core pieces. We believe we're positioning ourselves to move off of Ben Simmons' contract in another year. All of those things remain true, regardless of if they're a 500 team or 20 games below. The difference is if you're covering the team, if you're a fan of the team, it feels like you are being absolutely dragged across rocks for multiple months on end. And I was surprised that I did find myself saying like, hey, all of these things are problems. Maybe it is down to the studs kind of territory. From a Brooklyn Nets perspective, I'm sure it's disappointing, but it doesn't really change their high level view of this team going forward, I don't think, which is unfortunate.
You mean a game like this doesn't change?
No, like a game, a stretch like this, a run like this,
sorry.
Losing all these games. They don't like, not that they don't care, but like it doesn't matter to them because in their mind, it's still about clearing cap, attracting a superstar, and then all these pieces fit into place better. Now, I don't think they anticipated losing as much as they have over this past month, but in the end, it only really hurts when you're on it day to day. You're on the grind. They're thinking about this 6 months from now when they land a superstar in a big trade with all the draft capital, and then Mikal becomes your second or third best player. Like, I think that long-term view is always what the front office is going to be holding on to through all these losing streaks.
You know what's crazy? I just didn't even realize this till right now is that the Rockets only have 3 more wins than the Nets. The Rockets are 21-24. And I guess I just thought their record was better. I look at this a ton. I don't know if my brain just kind of like
a winning record team.
Like, I don't know if my eyes have just gone crossed about this or Ime gets, gassed up a lot and he's good. So like, it's not that. But like they're in 11th in the West and out of the playoffs right now. They're literally like the same exact spot in the West that the Nets are in the East. I guess if I just had been asked about that, I don't think I would have just thought the record was better. So it's interesting too, because I think we would all agree that the Rockets have significantly more talent than the Nets, right?
And by the way,
VanVleet, Jabari, Jalen, Şengün, like
Tari Eason, one of the things they got from the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, like some of the I don't know. It's just interesting. I guess that my eyes went cross about it. I just had not realized that. That's interesting.
10 games ago, they were 18-17. They've gone 3-7 in their last 10 now. So they're on a bit of a bad run heading towards that deadline. Okay, Dwayne Green. I meant okay, Dwayne Green. I don't know why I put a little bit negative on you. What one trade do you not only want to happen, but that you think will most likely happen? I would like both of you to give your views on this. Doug, you first.
I think I was the one that started this, and I was what a luck box that you got to read it, because then you can say, Doug, you first. Not only let me read this again. What's one trade do you not only want to happen that you think will most likely happen? Okay, I'm gonna go easy on this one. I think that I want to happen and most likely happen is that they trade Royce O'Neal for like some low-level player and like a second-round pick, and I think that's fine. Like I think that's where we are in just getting sort of back to normal on resetting some of this stuff. Just even second round picks are helpful for the Nets here too going forward, because like the tax implications are really great. They have a pretty good drafting track record. I guess we got to talk about Tariq Whitehead at some point, because that's really unfortunate news came out on him. He's going to miss the whole season with a shin injury, and that's like his third surgery on his legs. That's not a great spot to be. But so I'll go low level, easy kind of. Let's take an easy one, and that's what I'll say. But I don't know if you have something different.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny coming out of tonight. You go, well, maybe I think one that not only I think needs to happen, but I think will happen. It's like Dorian Finney-Smith, because now he almost goes down with the injury. You want to maximize the value you get for him, and because he's a controllable contract, I think that's obviously more attractive. And we've heard some teams being around it. I'll say Spencer Dinwiddie, because I just think that it feels like the time to move on has come here. You open up more minutes for Cam Thomas, maybe take out a little bit of a roadblock, open up more minutes for guys like Lonnie Walker and Dennis Smith Jr. Like, you have some guys on the roster that can fill a bit of that void. So I'll say that I think that's probably likely too, because he's also expiring. So both you and I are talking about 2 expiring contracts, which I think makes sense. And by the way, that's also slightly tied to Doug and I's feeling about previous years where expiring contracts sat on this roster and weren't maybe moved when there was value. And by the way,
they have to take like the chip-ins here, right? Like they just have to be, and they just have been unwilling to do this in the past. And so I think, it just hasn't happened. And so I think that like that's where I start. I'm not interested in a lot of some of these higher level moves that have been talked about. And I just don't think clearly guys like Mitchell aren't even going to be on the trading block. So I think those are out, right? So the Cavs just been too good.
Yeah.
And so
I'm also not a fan of getting involved as the third team in some of these trades. The D'Angelo
so let me put this one up here.
Oh, there you go. That's part of trade for D'Lo back. It's funny. There was a comment about this. I'll fail to credit who it was, about that the perception maybe of D'Angelo Russell is a little bit lower than it should be, like based on just what he is, right, and the type of player he is. I would.
There's certain media guys that hate him,
right?
To like a weird. I would call it like a borderline weird extent for like what he is. And so I'm not even gonna say who these guys are. It's very obvious if you listen to enough basketball podcasts that there's like a certain contingent of guys out there with big names with huge platforms that really hate his game and have.
Right.
I don't know if it's like now they can't pivot from it because they said it once or whatever, but I think that like he's clearly not a superstar and he's clearly not a max guy or like whatever, like, you know, when he left Brooklyn or whatever. These are his stats over the last couple games.
Yeah,
29 points, 27 points, 34 points, 20 points, 29 points. Lakers are 3-5 in that stand. LeBron didn't play one of those games. At least he's 49. Yeah, he's 52, 49, 80. His splits for the last month. Like,
Yep.
Okay, like dislike his game or whatever, but these are like ridiculously efficient stats, and it's gone way too far, way overboard with people not liking him for sure.
And he's basically 28 years old now too, just in terms of right where he fits in. My only reason for my reason for not wanting to bring him back in is less about his game. I think in the short term it could work. It's the player option that he has the following year. Now it's only 18.7, but I just think it's two things. One, bringing that back in and then extending the timeline of clearing off money, that's a little bit funky for me. And then the other thing is the way that these trades have been discussed is D'Angelo Russell ends up on the Nets because Murray's going to go to the Lakers and the Hawks don't want to have that money on their books. Okay, fine. And then it's Spencer Dinwiddie ends up on the Hawks because it's an expiring deal. If you told me that Jalen Hood-Schifino ends up getting put onto the Brooklyn Nets because that's the sweetener to get it done, that's one thing. There's not a huge value to that unless you believe in the functional fit that D'Angelo Russell presents for your team as currently constituted. And you could have that discussion, but I don't know, like, it seems like a little bit too low of value to just basically say, yeah, we'll take him and that player option for the following year so that you guys can get this deal done.
Oh yeah, what I also should have said is I don't want them to trade for him, right? I don't want like really them to give up assets to get him. If they're just like end up being a third team here in the mix that can somehow get him in by giving up like one of these wings, I mostly was just commenting that like there's guys in the media that have huge platforms that have just taken it upon themselves to trash his game, and it's way overboard. Can
I ask you a quick question? Sorry, I know we want to get out the door here, but we're doing tight. If the Nets did do that, is there a functional problem if you are a Cam Thomas believer and a Cam Thomas starter believer? Do you think there's a functional problem having D'Lo and him together potentially?
Yeah, I mean, they would get trucked on defense again. And like we've seen him, D'Lo has like sort of like a methodical pick and roll, get into the mid-range game. And I guess his assist numbers have been decent too. I don't know. The Nets shouldn't do it where they give anything up, right? But like, I think that I really don't want them to trade for him. I was mostly just making a comment about like sort of the rest.
No, I agree. I was just it's spawned a curiosity for me. Let's close out with Jonathan here, who brings in. Would you think getting a point
I got one more
like
after this? By the way, sorry, real quick. Don't close after this. We'll answer this one on that. I want to do one more.
Tyus Jones or campaign plus a Wendell Carter Jr. and some draft picks would be a successful deadline. I guess. I mean, Tyus Jones is a good player. He's undersized and small. Like, none of these guys are like, do I think if they went and got them, would I feel it's like a massive needle mover? It really comes down to what else does it look like? You said, and some draft picks. I don't know. None of these guys like jumps off me where I think, oh, I absolutely have to.
So I think that like I'm not sure like these things line up with each other is my problem with this, right? So I think that you're gonna have to give. You'd have to give up. You have to give up to get these guys draft picks. And I don't think like Tyus Jones, he'll probably get added to some playoff team. I think that needs a backup point guard. I think that's like what you're going to see happen. Campaign, I don't have any interest in. And then Wendell Carter Jr. just like, he's actually back in the starting lineup for the Magic. So I think that like they had talked about maybe wanting to move him. And I don't know if they're sort of showcasing him leading into the trade deadline because him and Goga Bitadze, have been moving in and out of the starting lineup, like sort of back and forth. But he just played 35 minutes against Memphis the other day. So I don't know if it's like these are showcase minutes or these are, hey, we're going to roll with you. And maybe it's a little easier to play him with Fultz back. I'm not exactly sure what the plan there is. So I don't think those guys are going to do it. Another one. Yeah, we still playing previous coaches. So this is actually one thing. Nash is still on the books. Yeah. Nash is still on the books until the end of this year. This is one of the other reasons I think Vaughn is quote unquote safe until the end of the year. Is that I don't think they want to pay 3 coaches, and I think they can see where this is going. Among many reasons why I don't think Vaughn is going to get fired, I actually think this is another part of it. Like, I think they don't want to have 3 coaches on the books, and so I think that they need Nash's money to come off, which it will at the end of the year. Vaughn will still be 2 more years after. Is that right? Or 1 more year after this? He signed an extension. I can't remember. They signed an extension for 3 years, but I can't. Maybe I'm doing the math wrong. Anyway, he's got at least 1 more year. Maybe it's 2. So that, yes, they're still paying. As of right now paying 2
through 26, 27. Jock Vaughn.
Great. So he's got 2 more years after this. So he's coming back. He's safe through the end of the season. It does not matter. They could lose. I'm telling you right now, they could lose every game from now to the end of the season. He will not get fired. I would bet anything on that. Ooh, speaking of bets, how about my call tonight? Dylan Brooks getting a tech.
Yeah.
38 minutes later, teed up.
You know what? I want to get to Jean Remy here in a second, but one other thing that I thought about in this game too was I was like, one of the ways I think Houston got back into this was some chippiness, getting in guys' faces a little bit. You had even Mikal Bridges at one point was jawing a little bit too. Dennis Smith Jr. was there with Fred VanVleet in spots. It was an interesting thing just to watch in terms of the Nets aren't a big team. They don't have a lot of size or strength to them, but some of that jawing stuff, like I like seeing how teams and players react to that. I thought the Nets for the most part did stay composed with it. The fourth quarter kind of was its own isolated thing. Last one. I don't know. Doug keeps firing him off here. Jean Remy, due to the fourth quarter closure, how would you rank Jacques Vaughn as a coach? I'll drill down on this from the standpoint of Dorian Finney-Smith gets injured. I don't know if this is what you're speaking to, but you have Harry Giles is on the bench, right? You called back Noah Clowney from the G League, and they don't see any time on the floor. It's not surprising. And even though I believe Noah Clowney should get some run, this is a really hard spot to turn to a rookie and go, hey, buddy, why don't you hop in and give us a hot 5? You know, like it's a hard spots to put him in. Would Harry Giles help with the rebounds on that play where they foul and gets back at the line? Yeah, probably. But I don't know if I take anything away from this. Like, players miss shots. Players turn the ball over.
Bottom third, he's the bottom third of the coach. He's the bottom third of the coaching rankings for sure. Like,
right? Yeah, yeah.
I
don't have him top 10. You know what I mean?
I think he's easily in the bottom third and probably lower. They've been, they've struggled with like maybe some of the simpler parts of the game at times. The rotations are all over the place. They've played 5-man units that have been really bad, and combinations that have been really bad. So I just don't. We haven't seen enough
tonight, though. Thought he was good with the timeouts tonight.
I never care about that, really.
I'm counting. No, it is what it is. And by the way, too, like, and I'm not defending Jacques Vaughn. I agree with Doug. He's in the bottom third, maybe even lower. But by the way, when you have a superstar on your team, that makes up for a lot of the gaps and for a lot of the gaffes and the mistakes. Like, there are the top 10 coaches. They're the elite guys in the league, top 15 guys. Like, there's a lot of great coaches. And then there's a lot of coaches that are kind of middle of the pack that get elevated based on having, like Jason Kidd, for example. Go listen to the Locked On Mavs podcast with Nick Angstad. They, rail on all the mistakes and errors that he makes. But having a Luka Doncic, wouldn't you know it, adding a Kyrie Irving, hey, guess what? You win a lot of basketball games when you just have some of the best players. And that can be a salve for issues or errors along the way.
Of course, and I honestly, it's funny. That's why I was glad to mention that, like the Rockets record. It's like everyone. I think Ime's a great coach. I would love if he was the coach. I wish they had just brought him in, right? And it's like, I don't know, 3 more wins. You got 3 more wins. Like for a better roster and a better coach. Like, what are you? How much better is it? I mean, I'd swap the franchises right now easily, like without even thinking about it. Everything we just swap 1 for 1. Of course, I'm just mostly saying, like, let's just all take a look at what are some of these other situations that you think are so much better. It's like, I don't know. It's not that much better. Okay. We're going to get out of here. Much appreciated, everyone here on YouTube. Make sure you go check out WeGotNets.com. Like I said, totally free. Everyone likes something for free. Get something in your inbox every day. Awesome win. Thank you, Profit PR. But yeah, WeGotNets.com. Go head it over, grab those free stories, and hope to hear from you.
We just like having fun with everything we do. Young Dolph.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Casual pause. Basketball. Yeah.